Welcome back to English Through Stories. I'm Elio.
And I'm Maya. And I just want to say before we get into anything, today's episode is going to feel different.
It is a little different.
Because every episode we've done, the story is about a workplace, or a first day somewhere new, or a professional situation. And those stories matter. But today's story is about something more personal, more vulnerable. And I think the English mistake in today's story might be the most painful kind of mistake a person can make. Not because it's embarrassing in front of a manager or a client.
But because it happened in front of someone whose opinion mattered in a completely different way.
Exactly. Today's story is about a man named Rayo. And Rayo did something that I think, honestly, a lot of us have either done or come extremely close to doing. He tried to express his feelings to someone he liked, in English, his second language, with everything on the line.
And what he said and what the other person understood were two very different things.
Two very, very different things.
This is one of those stories where the language mistake and the emotional moment are so completely tangled together that you almost can't separate them. And I think that's important because language isn't just a tool for getting information across. It's how we connect, how we let people in. And when the language slips at that moment, at that particular moment,
It hurts in a specific way.
it really does. His name was Reo Tanaka, 24 years old, originally from Kyoto, Japan, and for the past 14 months, a master's student in environmental science at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. Reo was, by most accounts, a quiet person. Not shy, exactly. He had opinions, he had humor, he had the kind of dry, carefully delivered wit that takes people by surprise and makes them laugh before they've finished processing the joke. But he was measured. He thought before he spoke. He believed that words, used carefully, were more powerful than words used in abundance, which was a philosophy that served him reasonably well in Japanese and somewhat less predictably in English. His English was functional and genuinely improving. He understood lectures, he could write academic papers with the help of a good grammar checker and a great deal of patience, and he could navigate most everyday situations, the bus, the grocery store, the complex bureaucratic experience of university admin offices, with competence, if not always with total confidence. But there was one area of English where Reo felt genuinely, specifically, profoundly unprepared: the English of feelings. Not the academic vocabulary of emotion, he knew those words. He could write, "The study participants reported elevated levels of anxiety," without hesitation. But the casual, everyday, honest language of saying to another person, "I like you, I'm thinking about you, being around you makes my day better." That English lived in a different part of the language than the part he had studied. It was warmer, more exposed, more specific in ways that grammar books don't cover, and it was, for Reo, genuinely difficult. Her name was Clara. Clara Mendez, 23, a PhD student in the same department, originally from Sao Paulo, Brazil, which meant her English was also a second language, which was something they had discovered about each other in the second week of the semester, and which had created an instant, specific kind of solidarity between them. The solidarity of people who both knew what it felt like to reach for a word and find it just slightly out of reach. They had become friends in the way that people become friends in graduate school, through proximity and shared exhaustion and a particular mutual interest in each other's thinking. They sat near each other in seminars. They went to the same coffee shop on Tuesday and Thursday mornings before class, not by arrangement exactly, but by habit, which is a different kind of arrangement and in some ways a more honest one. They texted about readings, about department gossip, about the specific misery of writing literature reviews, and increasingly about things that had nothing to do with school at all. Reo was aware, had been aware for some time, that his interest in Clara had moved beyond the professional and into something quieter and more complicated. He didn't know if she felt the same.
He looked for signals, as people do, and found that he was too close to the situation to read them clearly, which is also something people do. He decided, after considerable deliberation, to say something. Not in person. The thought of doing it in person, in English, in real time, with no ability to revise or reconsider, produced a specific physical sensation in his chest that he recognized as fear. No, he would write it. Writing gave him time. Writing gave him the ability to choose. He spent most of a Sunday afternoon on the message. He wrote it in Japanese first to know what he wanted to say. Then he translated it carefully into English. Then he revised it 3 times. He consulted a dictionary twice. He read the final version aloud to himself in his apartment, which felt absurd and also felt necessary, and then he put the phone down and made himself a cup of tea and stared out the window for a while. What he wanted to communicate was this: I really enjoy spending time with you. You make ordinary days feel better. I'd like to keep spending time with you in a way that's a little more than just friends, if that's something you might also want. It was honest, it was gentle. It left room for her to say no without it being devastating. It was, he felt, the right thing to say. He picked up his phone. He typed the message. He pressed send. Then he put his phone face down on the table and did not look at it for 11 minutes, which he counted. When he looked, there were 3 small dots, the indicator, appearing and disappearing and appearing again. Then her reply came through. It said, "Reo, I'm a little surprised. I didn't know you felt this way. Can I ask, what exactly do you mean?" Reo read the message. He read it again. He felt the particular uncertainty of a person who has said a thing and is suddenly not sure whether the response is good or bad or somewhere more complicated than either. He typed back, "I just wanted to say how I feel. I thought I was clear?" 3 dots appeared. Then, "It's not that. It's just the way you said it was a little unexpected. I want to make sure I understand what you mean." Reo stared at his phone. He went back to his original message and read it slowly. He looked at every sentence. He looked at every word. He could not find the problem. He put the phone down and went for a walk, which is what he did when he needed to think without the specific pressure of a screen in his hand. He walked along the edge of campus where the trees were thick and the light came through at a low angle, and he went over the message in his mind, and he still couldn't find the problem. He went back home and texted Clara, "I'm sorry if something came out wrong. Can we talk?" She said, "Of course. Tomorrow morning? The coffee shop?" "Yes." He slept badly. The next morning he arrived at the coffee shop 8 minutes early and sat in their usual corner and ordered his usual Americano and spent 8 minutes going over possible explanations for what had gone wrong. Clara arrived. She sat down across from him. She looked, he was relieved to note, not upset exactly, but thoughtful, like someone who has been thinking about a question and ready to talk through it. She ordered her coffee. There was a moment of quiet. "Can I show you the message?" he said. "Sure." He found it in his phone and slid it across the table. She read it. He watched her face. She read it once. Then she went back to the beginning and read one specific sentence again. And then she looked up at him with an expression that was somewhere between amused and tender. "Reo," she said, "I like you too. I want to say that first before we get into this." Something released in his chest. "Okay," he said. "But look at this sentence." She turned the phone toward him and pointed. "You wrote, 'You make me feel hot inside.'" Reo looked at the sentence. "Yes," he said. "I meant warm, the feeling of warmth, like comfortable and happy. When I am with you, I feel this." Clara pressed her lips together in a way that was very clearly the face of someone trying not to smile too obviously. "I know," she said. "I figured that's what you meant, eventually. But Hot inside, in English, that means something different. Reo looked at the sentence. Something different, Reo repeated. Something more physical, Clara said, choosing her words with care. Less emotional warmth and more, it's kind of an attraction phrase, a physical attraction phrase. So when I read that sentence, I was like, oh wow, Reo is, okay, that is a very direct message. Reo looked at his coffee, then at the table, then slowly back at Clara. I wrote that to say I feel comfortable with you, like the way you feel sitting next to a window in the afternoon. I know, Clara said, smiling fully now, the kind of smile that is mostly warm and only a little bit amused, and the balance felt kind rather than unkind. And that image is lovely, by the way, the window in the afternoon. You should have written that. I should have written that, Reo agreed. They sat for a moment. The coffee shop made its usual sounds around them, the grinder, the low music, the particular white noise of a Tuesday morning in a university neighborhood. For what it's worth, Clara said quietly, both versions made me want to talk to you. Reo looked up at her. She picked up her coffee. I just wanted to make sure the first one was an accident. It was. It was very much an accident. Good, she said. Then I'd like to keep spending time with you too, in the way you meant. Reo picked up his own coffee. Outside the window, it was raining in the light, persistent way that Vancouver rains in autumn, not dramatically, not urgently, just steadily and without apology. He thought about the message, about the word he had chosen, about the window in the afternoon. He thought, next time, write the image. Then he drank his coffee, and they talked for an hour about things that had nothing to do with language at all.
That ending.
Yeah.
Both versions made me want to talk to you. I wasn't expecting to be moved by a podcast script about an English vocabulary mistake, and yet here I am.
That's what happens when the language mistake is inside a human moment. It stops being just about words.
And Clara was so gracious about it. She said she liked him first, before explaining the mistake, because she knew he needed to hear that first.
That's emotional intelligence. She understood that the language question was secondary to the bigger conversation they were having, which is also, now that I think about it, a lesson in itself. The way you deliver a correction matters as much as the correction.
Okay, but let's talk about the mistake, because I want listeners to understand exactly what happened and why this particular error is so easy to make.
Right. So Rio wanted to say, "You make me feel warm inside." That phrase, warm inside, means a soft, comfortable, genuine emotional feeling. Happiness, safety, belonging. It's a lovely phrase. It's exactly what he meant.
But he wrote hot inside.
He wrote hot inside. And here's why this is such a natural and understandable mistake. In Japanese, and in many other languages, the words for warmth and heat, for warm and hot, exist on a single spectrum. The word that describes the feeling of something comfortably warm and the word that describes something physically hot are either the same word or very close words. So when Rio translated that warm feeling into English, he reached for hot, which is technically on the same temperature spectrum, without knowing that in English, especially in the context of feelings and attraction, warm and hot live in completely different emotional territories.
Because in English, warm is emotional and gentle, and hot is physical, like attraction, desire.
Exactly. Warm in English is about comfort, safety, affection, kindness. She's a warm person. That was a warm gesture. You make me feel warm inside. All of these are soft, emotionally gentle expressions. Hot, on the other hand, especially in the context of describing a person or a feeling related to a person, almost always carries a physical, romantic, or sexual connotation. It's not a subtle difference. It's a fairly significant one.
Which is why Clara reread the sentence, because the first reading was quite a different message than the one he intended.
Quite a different message. And yet,
And I want to acknowledge this. It's such a logical error. 1 degree of temperature, one step along what seems like a natural scale. But in the emotional vocabulary of English, that one step crosses a real boundary.
Okay, so what should Rayo have written? Give us the alternatives.
So the most direct replacement, the one that keeps his exact intended meaning, is simply, you make me feel warm inside. That one-word change transforms the whole sentence. Warm gives it exactly the gentle, emotional quality he was going for.
And that phrase is used naturally in English? Like a native speaker would say that?
Completely naturally. That story made me feel warm inside. Being around her makes me feel warm. There's something about him that gives me this warm feeling. These all sound natural, and they all communicate safe, happy, emotionally connected.
And then he said something at the end of the story, that moment that Clara pointed out. He said he wanted to describe the feeling as like sitting next to a window in the afternoon, and she said he should have written that.
Which is genuinely beautiful language, and it's worth pausing on because it points to something important about expressing feelings in a second language. Sometimes when learners are trying to communicate an emotion, they reach for the direct translation of the word, which, as Rio discovered, can go sideways. But describing the feeling itself, the image, the sensation, the physical experience of an emotion can be both more precise and more beautiful than any single word.
So instead of searching for the right word for the emotion, describe what the emotion feels like.
Exactly. When I'm with you, I feel like I'm sitting next to a window in the afternoon. Tells the other person far more than you make me feel warm. And it completely avoids the word translation risk because you're not translating a word, you're describing a personal experience.
That is genuinely useful advice, not just for expressing feelings, but for any time you can't find the right word. Don't translate the word. Describe the experience.
Don't translate the word, describe the experience. Write that down, everyone.
Let's talk about a few other phrases in this same category, the vocabulary of expressing feelings to someone you like, because I think this is an area where a lot of English learners genuinely feel unequipped. Like, we learn workplace English, we learn academic English, we learn travel English, but the English of liking someone?
It doesn't come up much in textbooks.
It does not come up much in textbooks, and yet it is one of the most important kinds of communication there is.
Okay, so let's give listeners a small toolkit. These are phrases that are natural, honest, and warm, without crossing into anything too intense or too physical, the kind of language Rio was going for. I really enjoy spending time with you. This is exactly what he wrote, and it's perfect. It says, your company has specific value to me. It's gentle, it's clear, it's not overwhelming. I feel comfortable around you. This is a beautiful one. It means I can be myself with you. I'm not performing or nervous. That's a real thing to tell someone, and it lands as a genuine compliment. You make my day better. Simple, warm, honest, not dramatic, not intense, just your presence has a positive effect on ordinary life. Very natural to say or write. I've been thinking about you. This one is slightly more direct. It signals something beyond friendship, but it's soft enough to not be overwhelming. It creates an opening for a conversation rather than forcing a conclusion.
And all of these they feel real. They don't feel like phrases from a romance novel or a drama. They feel like things a person would actually say.
Which is exactly the register Rio needed. He wasn't trying to write something dramatic or intense. He was trying to say, I like you. I'm comfortable with you. I'd like to see where this goes. And all four of those phrases communicate exactly that, without any accidental temperature-related complications.
Without any accidental temperature-related complications. I'm going to use that phrase.
It's very specific to this situation.
Okay, I also want to talk about something broader here, because the story is specifically about a crush, about romantic feelings. But the underlying mistake, confusing two words that seem to exist on the same scale but have very different emotional registers, that happens in so many other contexts too.
It does. And the pattern is worth naming, because once you see it, you start noticing it everywhere. English is full of word pairs that look like they're on the same spectrum, but actually live in very different emotional territories. Warm and hot is one, but there are others. Slim and thin, Both describe body shape, but slim tends to be a compliment, while thin can feel clinical or even slightly negative depending on context. Confident and arrogant both describe a person who believes in themselves, but confident is admired and arrogant is a criticism.
Frugal and cheap both describe someone who doesn't spend much money, but frugal suggests wisdom and discipline, while cheap suggests a kind of meanness or unwillingness to be generous.
Oh, this is so interesting, because in all of those cases, a learner might look at the two words, see them as synonyms or near synonyms, and choose the wrong one entirely by accident.
And the gap between them, the emotional territory they don't share, is often invisible until someone reacts in a way you didn't expect.
Like Clara rereading the sentence.
Like Clara rereading the sentence. And this is actually one of the reasons why reading, not just studying English, but reading novels, reading real conversations, reading the way people actually write to each other, is so valuable. Because you absorb these distinctions over time through context in a way that a vocabulary list can't quite replicate.
You see the word in its natural habitat.
The word in its natural habitat, yes. You see how it's used, who uses it, in what kind of moment, with what kind of response. And slowly, not overnight, but slowly, the emotional weight of words becomes part of your instinct, not just your vocabulary list.
And in the meantime, while you're building that instinct, what's the best strategy? Because Rio spent a whole Sunday on that message. He was careful, he was deliberate, and he still landed on the wrong word.
The strategy that would have helped Rio most, and this is practical advice for any learner who is writing something emotionally important in English, is to search for the phrase, not just the word. Instead of thinking, what is the English word for this warm feeling? Search the phrase. Type, words for feeling warm and happy, or how to say, I feel comfortable with someone in English, into a search engine. You'll find natural phrases used in real context by real people, and you can see immediately which ones carry the meaning you intend.
Because searching a phrase gives you context. It shows you the word in use, not just in definition.
Exactly. A dictionary would tell you that hot can mean a high temperature. It will not always tell you that in the specific context of feelings about a person, hot has a very particular meaning that is different from warm. The phrase search gives you that real-world context.
And if you're ever really unsure about whether a phrase carries the right meaning, especially in a message that matters, ask someone. A friend, a language partner, anyone. Just say, does this phrase mean what I think it means?
Which is something Rio didn't do, and we completely understand why. The message felt too personal to share with someone else for checking. But even a quick search, even asking a trusted friend, does this expression sound weird, can save you from a very memorable Tuesday morning conversation.
Although, in Rio's case, I'm not sure the conversation was entirely a bad thing.
In Rio's case, the mistake arguably moved things forward. Clara said herself, both versions made her want to talk to him.
Because ultimately, the feeling underneath the words was real, and real feelings they're hard to entirely misread, even through an awkward word choice.
That's true. Language is the tool, but the feeling gives the tool its purpose. And when the feeling is genuine, people sense that even through imperfect words.
Which doesn't mean we shouldn't learn the right words, but it's a good reminder that a mistake, even a really memorable one, isn't necessarily the end of the conversation.
It almost never is.
Okay, let's bring it together. Clean, clear, something listeners can carry with them.
All right, 3 things from today. First, warm and hot in English are not interchangeable when talking about feelings. Warm is emotional, gentle, safe. Warm inside means happy and comforted. Hot in this context has a physical meaning that is significantly more intense. If you want to express genuine, tender affection, warm is your word. Second, when you can't find the right word for a feeling, describe the experience instead. Don't translate the emotion. Describe what it feels like in your body, in your day, in the moments when it's present, like sitting by a window in the afternoon. That kind of language is both more precise and more beautiful than any single translated word. And third, for any message that matters emotionally, search for phrases in context, not just single words in a dictionary. See the word in use. See who says it, when, and what the other person understands. Context is everything.
And to Rio, wherever you are, you wrote a message that was honest, genuine, and brave. The word was wrong, but the feeling was right, and apparently that was enough.
The window in the afternoon.
The window in the afternoon. A warm beat of silence. Okay, now it's your turn. And this is the part of our show that we genuinely love the most, because what you share in the comments is often more honest and more moving than anything we could plan.
So, here's our question for this week. Have you ever said something to someone you liked or someone important to you in English and it came out wrong? Maybe you used the wrong word like Rio did. Maybe you translated a phrase directly from your first language and it landed differently than you intended. Maybe you said something too direct or not direct enough and the other person misunderstood.
We want to know what happened. And if you're willing to share it, we want to know what you did after. Did you correct yourself? Did you explain? Did you write a message like Rio did? Did you have a coffee shop conversation that changed things?
Because here's what we know from doing this show. Every single person listening right now has a version of this story, a moment where the language didn't quite carry the feeling, where the word you had and the word you needed were just slightly different. And those moments are not failures.
They're chapters.
They're chapters, and sharing them here, honestly, without judgment, is how we learn together. Not just the vocabulary, but the courage to keep trying.
Leave your story in the comments. Be as detailed or as brief as you like. We read every single one.
And to everyone who has ever taken a breath and sent a message in a second language, knowing you might get it slightly wrong, but deciding that saying something was more important than saying nothing.
This episode is for you.
See you in the next story.
See you in the next story.